Hello, my name's Gary Ford, Managing Director of Tiger Hobbies Limited, UK hobby importers and distributors. When the United States went to war with Japan, a number of Boeing B-29 Flying Fortress were stationed in the Pacific area, both in Hawaii and in the Philippines. Many of these were destroyed in the Japanese attacks, but many put up a valiant effort against the odds, including B-17D, the Swoos, and B-17E, Old 666. During the early Solomon campaigns, the B-17s were invaluable to the US forces, but as the Pacific campaign widened over a larger area, the range of the B-17 proved less effective, and it was the consolidated B-24 Liberator, with its longer range, that would come into its own around the Pacific area. But even this would not be good enough by late 1944 over the vast ranges of the Central Pacific Belt. Back in 1938, the US Army Air Corps saw the need for a long-range bomber, and by 1940, Lockheed, Boeing, Consolidated and Douglas all submitted designs. Only the Boeing with its Model 345 that would become the B-29 and Consolidated's Model 33 that would become the B-32 Dominator would remain in the race. The B-32 would be a more basic aircraft and would be the standby aircraft if the B-29 failed. And the requirement was very ambitious. They wanted an aircraft with a range of 4,000 miles, a speed of 400 miles an hour with a 20,000 pound bomb load. By May 1941, an order was placed by the US Army Air Corps for 14 test frames and 250 production frames for what would become the B-29. And this would increase to 500 by early 1942. By September 1942, the first test flights would take place, and this would be the most expensive project of World War II, at close to $3 billion, almost twice that of the Manhattan Project to build the first atomic bomb. Testing proved incredibly difficult, with constant engine fires with the massively powerful 2,000 horsepower Wright R3350 engines, and a number of crashes. And it was not until late 1943 that the aircraft was accepted to the USAAF's General Service. The aircraft was very complex for World War II. Fully pressurised crew areas, tricycle undercarriage, early analogue computer-controlled remote gun turrets, with an operational range of over 3,000 miles, 350 mile an hour top speed, close to a fighter, and a bomb load of 20,000 pounds. But this was greatly reduced at the longer ranges of over 1,600 miles. By early 1945, the USAAF was struggling with this aircraft to get it into operational, and it did not fly its first missions from India until June of 1944. Bombing from China to Western Japan would take place from late June 1944 until early 45, but on a limited basis, with raids of no more than 90 aircraft. The solution was to hit the critical areas of Japan, was to take the Mariana Islands that we have covered in our Pacific War Part 1 video. A bloody affair, costing thousands of US Marines and US Army casualties. Even before the fighting was over, US Navy Seabees were building or constructing or converting Japanese airfields to take the B-29s, now known as the Superfortress. 5 massive airfields were built on Tinian, Guam and Saipan, each airfield capable of hosting over 200 B-29s, with the first mission flown from the Marianas in late October 1944 to attack Truk Atoll. And in late November 1944, 100 Superfortresses attacked Tokyo, the first time since Doolittle raid, with a combat radius of over 3,000 miles. We're now going to introduce one of the most infamous figures of the bombing campaigns in World War II, General Curtis LeMay, who once quoted, "If I lose this war, or we lose this war, I'll be done for war crimes." Here is a classic picture of LeMay with massive cigar in hand. Born in 1906 to fairly poor parents, he managed to go to university to study civil engineering, and by 1929 applied for a reserve commission in the Air Corps, having gone through Reserve Officer Training, or ROTC, and then a regular commission in 1930. He completed flight training in the early 30s, gaining his wings in 1932, going on to pursuit aircraft or fighter aircraft. for a number of years before moving over to bombers in 1937. But his calling was for navigation, which he was to be proved very, very good. Like all pre-war officers, promotion was very slow, still a first lieutenant in 1940. But with the US entry into World War II, at the end of 1941, LeMay was a major, and he was soon commanding B-17s of the 305 Bomb Group as a colonel in England in late 1942. He led the 305 Bomb Group in combat on a number of dangerous missions, constantly driving his men and leading from the front, known as Old Iron Pants. He was soon noted as an effective combat leader by senior 8th Bomber Command officers. He helped develop the bomber box formation with its tight formations and lots of covering 50 cal machine guns for defence. And by September 1943, he was promoted to Brigadier General at the age of just 37 and put in command of the 3rd Air Division. He still led combat missions, including the Schweinfurt-Regensburg raid mission, but after this, he was now deemed too valuable to lose over Germany. He continued to lead the 3rd Air Division until May 1944, when the United States Army Air Force had other plans for him and promoted him to Major General and to lead a full bombing force in China and the B-29 Superfortress. The early B-29 missions over Japan were generally not getting results, with very few getting near the target. One of the reasons was the Jetstream over Japan, which was very, very strong, that affects bombing accuracy from high altitudes. Dropping to low level would be dangerous, as Japanese air defences were primed for combat at this level. The United States Army Air Force were still not convinced bombing at night would work, but LeMay had no such worries, and in early 1945 was transferred to the Marianas to take over 21st Bomber Command. The 21st Bomber Command's previous commander was General Hansell, one of the USAF's pioneers of bombing and part of the bomber mafia. He helped develop precision daylight bombing and later helped bring into service the B-29 Superfortress. Hansell was an incredible organiser and a plans officer, but in the Pacific he was stuck in his ways of daylight bombing and it was not working over Japan. Hansell stuck to his guns and tried to make it work, but he was up against it. Even the B-29 was letting him down with technical problems. Some in the upper echelons of the USAF were now thinking of the RAF Bomber Command's tactics of indiscriminate area bombing with incendiaries, a tactic that Hansell thought utterly repugnant and immoral. In some of the last daylight raids, results showed success, and with Iwo Jima in the hands of the US by February 45, a forward base for P-51 Mustangs to sweep the Japanese fighters from the skies. It could have worked. One of the things that Hansell did do before he was relieved of command by LeMay, who was his subordinate in the 8th Air Force, was to put into being a system of rescue US submarines that would sail along the lines of the flight plans of the US bombers and fighters to rescue crews who ditched into the Pacific. LeMay, now a Major General, took over the B-29 force in the Marianas, now growing in numbers each day, and some of the problems of the B-29 were ironed out. He switched the force to low-level night bombing of Japanese cities with incendiaries, bombing between 9 and 5,000 feet in mass formation. He would target almost 70 cities to total destruction. It was stated, "We have stopped trying to swat the flies, now we're going to bomb the manure pile." The first major raid was Operation Meeting House on the 9th and 10th of March 1945 on the Japanese capital of Tokyo. The mission was to cause the maximum destruction and death in the densely populated working class areas of Tokyo, where up to 2 million lived in wooden and paper houses. 339 B-29 Superfortresses left Marianas and about 280 reached the target, with about 30 lost, which was a high percentage of the force. But it destroyed over 260,000 buildings, leaving over 1 million homeless and killing over 100,000, and leaving many others severely injured. This figure is thought to be very low due to the dense nature of the population in the poor area, and the figure was possibly lowered again by US authorities as not to alarm people back home. After the war, a death toll of upwards of 200,000 was quoted. Whatever the figure was, it was the most destructive bombing raid in history, beating even the 2 combined nuclear attacks later in the war. Later, leaflets would be dropped on the Japanese cities prior to the raids to get people to evacuate and save their lives, stating, "Bombs have no eyes, save your lives, but we are determined to destroy any help to the military that prolongs this useless war." The Japanese were nowhere near as organised as the Germans against the bombers, and their AA guns were not as good, and their radar did not come along until late in the war, so had little notice of incoming raids. Thus could not vector night fighters to target the bombers as good as the Germans. They only had one half-decent night fighter equipped with radar. This was the Nakajima Jin, or Gecko, Irving. And most of the Geckos were not even radar equipped. And the highest Japanese night fighter race against the B-29 scored 8. Day fighters did a little better, with one claiming 17 B-29s. But operating height of 30,000 feet and powerful remote control gun turrets made it very difficult for the Japanese to engage these massive bombers. The gunners on the B-29 operated the Central Electric Central Fire Control, CFC, sighting system that you placed on the incoming Japanese fighter, operated an hand controller on a gimbal, there's always a gimbal, placed a light circle of the wings of the fighter, and the analog computer control guns would do the rest, work out the deflection before you fired. There were 2 gunners with waist sights and a gunner controller with the dome on top that also take control of any of the guns on the upper level of the aircraft. There was also a tail gunner with 2 50 caliber and 20mm cannon, though this was often removed and replaced with a third 50 cal. And there's also a sighting station in the nose of the aircraft to be operated by the bomb aimer. There would be almost 450 of these massive bombers lost over Japan, but only 150 were lost to Japanese fighters and AA guns. Most were lost to mechanical failures, including engine fires, and a good number returned by the skin of their teeth to the airfields on Iwo Jima. Compare this, though, to the 5,500 RAF bombers lost over Germany and 8,000 USAF bombers lost in Europe, and they killed less civilians on the ground than were killed in Japan. The Japanese civilian losses, well, no one really knows, but they reckon it's somewhere between 600,000 and 1 million. The US leadership including politicians, were having a real hard time reconciling what they were doing over Japan. But war modelling was seeing an estimate of upwards of 2.5 million Allied casualties if the Allies had to invade mainland Japan. So they're looking at all options, including blockade and starvation, and including the use of chemical and biological weapons. General LeMay was tasked by General Arnold to carry out Operation Starvation on behalf of Admiral Chester Nimitz. This was the mining of all waters around Japan to prevent food ships from getting into port. LeMay tasked the 330th Bombardment Group to carry this out. And from April 1945, individual B-29s would fly low level at night, dropping parachute mines and many other types of mines and acoustic detonators. Thousands of mines were dropped over the following months, and the damage it did surpassed even the damage done by US submarines, with almost 700 ships sunk and over 1.25 million tons sent to the bottom. Only about 5% of 21st Bomber Command aircraft were used, and post-war studies reckon if they'd have done this on a much larger scale and early in the war, it could have shortened the war. Earlier in episode 1, I mentioned the B-32 Dominator, which was the less advanced long-range bomber to be put in huge numbers if the B-29 project failed. The USAF went for the B-29, and production of the B-32 was massively reduced to just over 100 aircraft. Many of you may not have even heard of this bomber, but it did see service in the closing days of World War II in the Pacific. And I'm showing a picture of this bomber, which kind of built by Consolidated, that resembles a B-24 on steroids. Less advanced and a lot less complicated than the B-29, its specifications were very similar. Speed about 357 miles an hour, little faster. Range about 3,800 miles, again, little longer. And the altitude of about 30,000 feet, again with a 20,000 pound bomb load, with 10 50 cal machine guns for defence. Entered operational service with the 386 Bomb Group on the 13th of August 1945, after the dropping of the 2 atomic bombs, but the Japanese were still sending up armed fighters. Combat did occur between B-32 Dominators and Japanese fighters on a number of occasions. The B-32s were used as recce aircraft from Okinawa. On the 18th of August, a B-32 Dominator called Obo Queen II was attacked by Japanese aircraft, and Sergeant Anthony Mashoni, a photographed assistant, was the last US serviceman to die in air combat in World War II. The B-32 was ordered to be scrapped totally after the war, other than the odd airframe, with the last ones being scrapped in 1949. Only a few wing panels and turrets survive to this day. In the next episode, we shall look at the final option the Allies had to defeat the Japanese, the use of the atomic bombs, and a little about its development.